Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Matt Gaetz drops his bid to serve as Trump's Attorney General after failing to quell senators' concerns about sex trafficking allegations. The International Criminal Court issues arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister, its former defense minister, and Hamas's military chief for crimes committed in Gaza. And unseated Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio discusses his party's defeats in this year's election and the future of the Democratic Party.
The voters expect Democrats to stand with workers, and when you don't, the disappointment is such that people move away.
Major funding for the PBS News Hour has been provided by
moving our economy for 160 years. BNSF, the engine that connects us.
Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Former Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz has withdrawn from the running as Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General. Sexual misconduct allegations against Gaetz fueled intense scrutiny, threatening his chances to be confirmed. Today, in a statement on social media, Gaetz wrote, quote, "While the momentum was strong, it's clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition." Yesterday, the House Ethics Committee deadlocked on a decision to release a report of a lengthy investigation into the allegations against Gaetz. He abruptly resigned from his role in Congress last week following Mr. Trump's nomination. Our Laura Barone-Lopez joins us now for more. So, Laura, tell us, what do we know about why Gaetz stepped aside?
Sources that I talked to today close to the transition said that Matt Gaetz simply did not have the votes. And the more and more that came out, the details that came out about these sexual assault allegations, sexual abuse allegations, it made his pathway harder, Amna. And the timing of the announcement is notable because Matt Gaetz announced this a day after meeting with senators on the Hill. He was joined by Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, and he could have only lost 3 votes in the Senate. And Gaetz never requested a meeting with some of the senators who were most likely to oppose him, like Senator Susan Collins of Maine. But ultimately, it appeared as though he didn't have the support at all. And in a post on Truth Social, President-elect Trump thanked Gaetz for trying to get the Senate approval and said that Gaetz was doing very well, but at the same time did not want to be a distraction for the administration, for which he has much respect. Now, that distraction that the president-elect as well as Gaetz have talked about is sexual misconduct allegations that also the House Ethics Committee was investigating. And as a reminder, Amna, 2 women testified to the House Ethics Committee investigators that Gaetz paid them for sex on multiple occasions, beginning in 2017 while he was a congressman. And one of the women testified that she saw Gaetz having sex with a 17-year-old at a party.
What kind of reaction is all this getting on Capitol Hill today?
Republican Senator Josh Hawley, who sits on the Judiciary Committee, said that ultimately Donald Trump needed someone better suited to the role. And Democrats like Senator Chris Coons, who is also on the Judiciary, said that the nomination all around was very troubling.
Listen, I think I go back to the fact that this is the president's cabinet. He's got to choose people who he has confidence in and who are going to be able to deliver, he believes, on his agenda.
For someone to be nominated to be the chief law enforcement officer of the United States and facing persistent and disturbing charges involving sex trafficking and drug use really caused some real challenges for him.
A number of Senate Republicans also said that there was a big sense of relief that Gaetz withdrew, and one GOP lawmaker texted me, Amna, quote, problem solved.
You mentioned that House Ethics Committee report. What happens to that now?
Leaders on the House Ethics Committee were quiet today about the future of that report. They had initially planned to meet on December 5th to decide whether to finish that report and to possibly release it. We don't know exactly if they're going to still hold that meeting. And
what about Matt Gaetz's future? Can he get his seat back next year?
Lawmakers that I spoke to today said that their understanding is that there is nothing really barring Matt Gaetz from coming back in January and taking the oath of office. Technically, Gaetz resigned for the current Congress, and many lawmakers are pointing to his carefully worded resignation letter, which said he does, quote, not intend to take the oath, so he could very well potentially come back.
So Gaetz is out of the running. Who else is President-elect Trump likely to nominate to be his attorney general?
Donald Trump's transition team didn't comment on who the president-elect is now considering, but sources close to the transition told me that he is still, he's back to the drawing board, essentially. But before nominating Gaetz, a number of Republican sources told me that names being considered included Matt Whitaker, who served as acting attorney general during Trump's first administration. He has since been named to be the ambassador to NATO. Mike Davis, a Republican lawyer and former Senate aide, as well as Andrew Bailey, the Missouri attorney general.
I know you're tracking the status of some of the other nominations around which people have questions. What's the latest on that?
Donald Trump's nominee to lead the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was on Capitol Hill today with J.D. Vance again, trying to gain support. This comes right after last night a 22-page police report was released that detailed a woman saying she was sexually assaulted by Hegseth in 2017. And Pete Hegseth was asked about these allegations on the Hill today.
Did you sexually assault a woman in Monterey, California?
I have, as far as the media is concerned, I'll keep this very simple. The matter was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
As you saw, Hegseth said there that the matter was investigated and that he was cleared, but Hegseth paid that woman in 2023, Amna, as part of a confidential settlement.
Laura Brown Lopez with the latest on the Trump transition. Laura, thank you.
Thank you.
Today, the world's top war crimes court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for what the court called crimes against humanity for intentionally depriving Gazans of food and directing attacks against civilians. Israel today called it an anti-Semitic attack on democracies trying to defend themselves from terrorism. Here's Nick Schifrin with more.
In the moonscape that is now northern Gaza, in the desperation of Gazan civilians, lacking the basic necessities of life, or what the International Criminal Court today called Israeli crimes against humanity for having, quote, intentionally and knowingly deprived the civilian population in Gaza of objects indispensable to their survival, including food, water, and medicine, and, quote, intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population of Gaza, as ICC prosecutor Karim Khan argued on the NewsHour in September.
Even war has rules, and yet we're seeing baby after baby destroyed. People in Gaza who want to have food and water, who want to stop waking up in terror as bombs land and the earth shakes and no place is safe, it seems, including schools.
Today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Khan a corrupt prosecutor and the ICC judges biased.
This is an anti-Semitic act that has one goal: to deter me, to deter us from exercising our natural right to defend ourselves against our enemies who rise up against us to destroy us, accusing the state of Israel of genocide while we are working to defend ourselves from an enemy who is trying to commit genocide against us.
The ICC accuses Netanyahu and Gallant of, quote, starvation as a method of warfare and impeding humanitarian aid with no justification.
When you put it all together, it's clear that Israel has chosen to fight Hamas, not just directly, not just by targeting fighters, but by squeezing Palestinian civilians.
Ken Roth is a Princeton professor and the former executive director of Human Rights Watch.
The court today, in affirming the arrest warrants, highlights, the starvation, the fact that children have died of malnutrition, the fact that people are having to have operations without anesthesia. This is because Israel has imposed one obstacle after another to the delivery of humanitarian aid.
Israel argues it does not restrict aid and has in the last year facilitated 39,000 trucks to enter Gaza with more than 840,000 tons of food. It also accuses the UN of failing to distribute enough aid and of Hamas and criminal gangs of stealing aid.
To accuse us of starving them is unbelievable. Those trucks are getting into Hamas' hands, and they're the one who's depriving it from their people.
Ori Egoz is a lieutenant colonel in the Israeli reserves and a former Israeli military lawyer and judge.
We're keeping the humanitarian law, and it's actually quite an absurd to hear it from our point of view.
Today's arrest warrants also accuse Netanyahu and Gallant of failing to prevent or investigate, quote, intentional attacks on civilians.
The affirmation of the arrest warrants is appropriate recognition that the way the Israeli government has been fighting the war in Gaza has been by pursuing a war crime strategy.
They're doing the best they can do, not to harm civilians. But again, this is war. To think that in a war you can be in a place that you don't harm civilians, it's impossible. You have to remember that Hamas is using intentionally human shields and putting his missiles and his targets inside schools.
The ICC also issued an arrest warrant today for the man who helped design that strategy, Mohammed Deif, even though Israel says it killed him months ago. As for Netanyahu and Gallant, the ICC's 124 member states are now obligated to arrest them, which means they hold the same international status as Russian President Vladimir Putin. Today's announcement could lead European countries to further slow weapons deliveries to Israel. But incoming National Security Advisor Mike Waltz suggested a, quote, strong response, suggesting the next Trump administration could reimpose sanctions on the court and Khan. And the White House today accused Khan of failing to engage with Israel constructively.
We fundamentally reject the court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israel officials.
As for Israel, it vowed the arrest warrants would not stop the war in Gaza until Israel achieves all its goals. For the PBS News Hour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
We start the day's other news with the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country has tested a new intermediate-range missile to strike Ukraine. Officials in Kyiv initially claimed it was an intercontinental ballistic missile, which is capable of carrying nuclear warheads over long distances. But American officials clarified it was likely a closer-range missile. Putin said the use of the new missile was a direct response to Western policy changes toward Ukraine's use of long-range weapons to strike inside Russia.
We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. And in the event of an escalation of aggressive actions, we will respond decisively and reciprocally.
Ukrainian officials say the missile was one of 9 fired at the central city of Dnipro. A number of businesses and residential buildings were damaged, and at least 2 people were injured. In Brazil, police have indicted former President Jair Bolsonaro on charges of orchestrating a failed coup following his 2022 election defeat. The accusation against the former right-wing leader and 36 others is just the latest legal challenge for Bolsonaro. Brazil's Supreme Court will review the document and decide whether to recommend the findings be sent to the country's prosecutor general, who will then either formally charge Bolsonaro or drop the investigation. Bolsonaro has denied any wrongdoing. The Danish military is closely watching a Chinese ship in the Baltic Sea after 2 major underwater fiber optic data cables were ruptured in recent days. The bulk carrier is anchored in the Sea of Kattegat off Denmark's northeast coast. The vessel, known as the Yipeng 3, was in the area at the time of the ruptures. Finland, Sweden, and Germany have all launched investigations into the damaged cables. Today, Denmark's defense minister said no conclusions can be drawn yet.
I look at it very seriously. I'll also start by saying we do not know the extent of the incident yet, whether it is sabotage or something else. But regardless, it is of course a situation that requires a lot of attention.
In Beijing today, a foreign ministry spokesman said he had no information about the Chinese ship's specific situation, but he added that he hoped the ship's rights to normal navigation would be protected. In southwestern Iceland, a volcano has erupted on the Reykjanes Peninsula for the 7th time in less than a year. The flow of lava started with little warning late Wednesday near the town of Grindavik, about 30 miles southwest of the capital, Reykjavik. Dozens of nearby houses were evacuated. Officials say the fissure is nearly 2 miles long, but add that the eruption is smaller than a similar one back in August. The volcanic area had previously been silent for 800 years before coming back to life in 2021. Back in this country, the highest court in Illinois has overturned Jussie Smollett's conviction. The actor had been charged with staging a racist and homophobic attack against himself in 2019. 2 years later, a jury found him guilty of disorderly conduct for filing a false hate crime report. Today, the state Supreme Court ruled Smollett was unjustly prosecuted since the initial charges were already dropped as part of a negotiated deal. The special prosecutor in that trial wrote of today's decision, quote, "Make no mistake, today's ruling has nothing to do with Mr. Smollett's innocence." Cryptocurrency markets took note of the announcement today that SEC Chairman Gary Gensler plans to resign effective January 20th, Inauguration Day. Under his leadership, the SEC has been aggressive in its oversight of the crypto industry. Bitcoin hit a new record after the news, flirting with $100,000. While on Wall Street, investors turned away from tech and towards more broad-based stocks. That helped the Dow jump more than 460 points on the day, or about 1%. The Nasdaq added just 6 points, so virtually flat. And the S&P 500 ended in positive territory. And the 2024 National Book Award for Fiction went to a brand new take on an American classic. James by Percival Everett reimagines the adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, this time from the perspective of Huck's companion, an enslaved man named Jim. In April, Everett told the NewsHour writing the book felt like having a conversation with Twain.
I'm perhaps writing the novel that he was not equipped to write. And nor would he even imagine it, because his character is Huck Finn. It's Huck's novel. But he could not occupy the psychic and cultural space that was occupied by Jim.
The nonfiction prize went to anthropologist Jason de Leon. His book, Soldiers and Kings, Survival and Hope in the World of Human Smuggling, chronicles the lives of smugglers who guide migrants across borders in Latin America. Something About Living by Palestinian-American author Lina Khalaf Tufaha won the Poetry Prize. Young People's Literature honors went to Shifa Saltagi Safadi for Kareem Between, and Taiwan Travelogue by Yang Shuangzi won for Translated Literature. And the country music industry has been honoring its own with some star performances and a few surprises at the 58th Annual Country Music Awards. Rising superstar Shabuzi was left out of the winner's circle, even though his hit, a bar song, Tipsy, has topped the Billboard Hot 100 list for 18 straight weeks. Chris Stapleton won the most awards with 3, including Male Vocalist of the Year. And Morgan Wallen was a no-show at the event, even though he topped the nominations list with 7. He only won a single award, but he made it count by grabbing the night's top honor of Entertainer of the Year. Still to come on the NewsHour, how Trump's transition team is ignoring and defying the norms of presidential transfers of power. The Department of Justice tries to force Google to sell its Chrome web browser to break its search monopoly. And a look at the precarious safety record of the military's Osprey aircraft.
This is the PBS News Hour from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The Senate map heavily favored Republicans this election cycle, so it came as little surprise when Democrats lost the majority in the upper chamber. In fact, just tonight, Democratic Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania officially conceded his race. But with Republicans also winning the White House and retaining control of the House of Representatives, there's been a lot of talk within the Democratic Party about what went wrong and what it should do to win back voters. Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio is one of the incumbents who came up short this year and has argued the party needs to do more to champion the issues of the working class. I spoke with him earlier today. Senator Sherrod Brown, welcome to the News Hour. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I got to ask you about your election loss because it really calcified for a lot of people that the Democratic Party had lost working Americans as a core part of their base. And it's surprising in your case because you have spent your entire career talking about working families and serving working Americans. It's been a central theme for you, even as your state drifted red. So why do you think that message in Ohio, why did it fail to resonate with voters this time around?
Well, it did resonate. I ran way ahead of the national ticket. I ran 7 or 8 points ahead of the national ticket. But it's been a slow migration away from the Democratic Party of American workers, starting with NAFTA. And since then, Democrats don't talk enough about workers, don't put workers at the center of what we should be doing. And my career has been working to do that. In my post-career, whatever it is, my post-Senate career will continue to do that. How do we make the Democratic Party the party of workers again? Because we've, not entirely, but we've much lost that.
But in your state, people know you. It's a central theme for you, and it still wasn't a winning message. So do you feel like you lost this time because of Bernie Moreno, your opponent, or because you're a Democrat?
Well, I lost mostly because I was a Democrat. I'm not really judging him, but they spent $220 million against me. That was literally 20 times what Mike DeWine spent as a senator in 2006 when I beat him. So it's a huge cascading of money in. The ads they ran about transgender and immigration were proven to be lies. The last 2 weeks, Donald Trump got on TV in their ads saying a vote for Sherrod Brown is a vote against Donald Trump. So when the top of the ticket, I'm not whining here, but when the top of the ticket wins, top of my ticket loses by 12 points, it's awfully hard to overcome that. But it just tells me that the Democratic Party over the last 30 years, the reputation of the party as a whole is that we have not, betray is too wrong, is too strong a word, but I still hear people in the Miami Valley, Dayton and Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley still talk about NAFTA. I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio, where I went to school with the sons and daughters. Name of my junior high was Johnny Appleseed Junior High, with the sons and daughters of machinists and electricians and steel workers and auto workers and rubber workers. And those jobs first went south because corporate leaders are always willing to seek cheaper wages, especially in non-union states. And then politicians of both parties sold out those workers by passing these trade agreements that caused a huge cascading of jobs overseas. And these communities, these workers did nothing wrong. They were productive. They carried union cards. Their lives were mostly middle class, and those days are gone. I mean, we've seen in the last 30 years, we've seen profits go up. We've seen executive compensation skyrocket. We've seen the stock market go up, and we've seen wages flat.
But you're saying they blame Democrats for this. Voters look at those trends and blame your party.
It's not entirely clear, but frankly, the voters expect Republicans to be corporate, to look out for their rich friends. But Democrats, we didn't expect that with Democrats. The voters expect Democrats to stand with workers. And when you don't, the disappointment is such that people move away.
Let me ask you, because I know you and other Senate Democrats met with Harris campaign officials on Capitol Hill today. My understanding is the first time since the election, and that meeting included the campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon. What can you tell us about what those conversations were?
Well, I don't talk about private meetings like that. So
was that a meeting that Senate Democrats had requested, or that the campaign?
I have no idea. It's a regular lunch. They came in. I didn't even know they were coming. I mean, I think the leader announced it, but I never ever talk about what happens in the Democratic caucus. I know you as media people often find out because I have colleagues that talk too much, and I'm not one of them in this case.
Can you give us a sense of if this was more of a listening session or a venting session for Senate
Democrats? I'm telling you all I'm going to tell you. Sorry. Let's go on. Let's try another one. You're a good reporter and a good interviewer, but sorry.
Not that good, apparently.
No, you're pretty good.
Well, look, we know the conversations for many Democrats I talk to. People say those conversations about what happened, what went wrong, need to unfold, that people need to take time and figure this out. But on the timeline of it, how do you look at that? Because House Democrats need to figure out what kind of stance they're going to be taking with the incoming majority, Republicans in the House, right? The midterms aren't that far off. So how do you look at this period of autopsy, of figuring out what went wrong?
Well, the mistake that perhaps journalists, certainly politicians make, is that that politics is left to right, liberal and conservative. For me, it's whose side are you on? And it means standing up for pensions. We passed, one of the things we've done the last 4 years is save the pensions of 100,000 workers. We've capped the price of insulin at $35. We passed a major bill that 1 million veterans have benefited from that were exposed to those football field-sized burn pits named after an Ohioan. We just look at inflation. I mean, when Connie and I often usually go to the grocery store after church. And
Connie, your wife.
Connie, my wife. And when we're walking down the aisle, one of the aisles, or we're at the meat counter or at the checkout line, people talk to me about inflation. I mean, they know who I am. They talk about inflation. And the answer most of the time is that you're paying those higher prices you're paying because of corporate profits, because of stock buybacks, because of executive compensation. And we've got to make that clear that I've built my whole career taking on interest groups, taking on the drug companies, holding Wall Street accountable. That's what the voters respond to. It also happens to be the right position in government to take them on. But again, look at stock prices way up in the last 30 years. The profits way up, executive compensation way up, wages flat. There's a reason for that, and that is too many politicians, almost all Republicans and a number of Democrats, have played too cozy with these special interests, period. And so when Connie and I made the decision 2+ years ago to run for re-election, I knew they were going to spend a lot of money because they want to beat people like me that stand up to the drug companies want to beat us, the tobacco companies, the companies that outsource jobs, Wall Street. They don't want people like me in office. I understand that. That's why they spend that money. I beat them in the past, and I'll beat them one way or another the next time.
We know in this election the economy mattered. We also know that the incumbent played a role and lingering frustration with the Biden administration. You've had a few weeks to reflect now, and I wonder if you think, should President Biden have run for that second term in the first place?
I'm not going to talk about, I don't want to look back and do that critique. It gets us nowhere. I want to look to the future.
But this is clearly a conversation Democrats are having right now.
There's no way to fix it if he made a mistake. I was one of 4 senators to call for him to step aside. I wish he had done it earlier, but I'm not going to do that kind of biopsy, or what's not a biopsy? What
autopsy?
Autopsy. But I don't think that serves a purpose. What does serve a purpose is Democrats have to sharpen our message. Whose side are you on? Not left or right, not the Democrats got too liberal or too conservative or the Republicans are too far right. Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on when you take on the drug companies, when you take on Wall Street, when you take on the companies that outsource jobs, period.
So as you look forward now for the future of the Democratic Party, there is a sense of frustration I've heard from some younger members of the caucus in their 30s and 40s that maybe it's time for more of a generational change. They point to the change in leadership in the House with Leader Jeffries there now, but they also point to the fact that Nancy Pelosi still exerts a lot of influence and a lot of power, and they say that same change hasn't happened in the Senate. Do you think that it should?
Well, it's just natural. I don't know about Nancy. Still has a lot. She has power because she's a great intellect and has an incredible record of public service. I mean, she's not the Democratic leader. The top 3 leaders, one from Massachusetts, one from New York, one from California. That may be a problem. I like all 3 of them. But the problem, in part, is we are seen in places like Ohio and Western PA and Michigan and Wisconsin as probably too much of a bi-coastal party. And every generation.
That's not reflected in the leadership.
Yeah, every generation. I'm not critical of any one of them in this case, but every generation you lose an election, people say we need new leadership.
Yeah.
I understand that. I expect that. But it's not just new leadership, and it's not just leadership, it's who's on your side.
Can I ask you, because as we sit here today, Matt Gaetz has now withdrawn his nomination to serve as Attorney General for the incoming Trump administration. Do you believe all the other nominees will be confirmed?
You know what? I'm not there anymore, so I don't even have to think about what's going to happen or predict. But let me say this: I would assume probably one more goes down or two because they're pretty extreme.
You said you're going to stay in the arena. There's going to be a special election for J.D. Vance's seat when he becomes vice president. Will you run?
I have no idea at this point. I've not made a decision. I'm going to stay in the arena one way or another. It might be elective office. It might be shows like this that maybe you only have me on because you think I'm going to run. Maybe you have me on because I maybe have something to say. I don't know. But I'm going to continue to speak out.
We always love to have you on. We hope you'll come
you.
back soon. Democratic Senator from Ohio, Sherrod Brown, thank you for being here.
Sure, thanks.
As former President Donald Trump prepares for a return to the White House, the aides and allies running his transition team have avoided many of the rules guiding the process, choosing instead to cut out the government his administration will take over in January. Our Laura Barone-Lopez is back now with a deeper look at the delays in the transition process.
Amna, so far, the president-elect's transition team has not collaborated with the General Services Administration. That's the government agency tasked with handing power from one administration to the next. They've also cut out other government agencies, and they've declined to have the FBI run background checks on appointees, instead relying on private services. The choices are a warning sign for many federal workers. Joining me to discuss is Max Stier. He's president and CEO of the Partnership for Public Service and an expert on presidential transitions. Max, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me here.
Some may think that Donald Trump has been president before, he knows what he's doing, he can do it again. But why exactly is the lack of communication and coordination with existing agencies a big deal?
So there are two answers to your question. The first is in the near term, the failure to engage with the government agencies that you just mentioned, including the White House, will mean that the Trump team will not be ready on day one, January 20th, when they're responsible for running our government. They will not be ready to govern in a way that can keep us safe and that can actually achieve the promises that have been made on the campaign trail. To run our government is a huge endeavor. You have to do a lot of preparation. You noted that President-elect Trump was president previously. That was a while ago. It's a team sport, and the rest of his leadership team was not part of that administration. They need to do a lot of prep work to be ready, and they need to engage with the agencies to actually be ready on day one.
So far, the president-elect has named roughly 15 of the 25 cabinet-level positions. So it doesn't seem as though he's being slowed down by the fact that they are not signing those ethics pledges. What exactly is the public missing here, and how could this delay the way government functions?
Sure. So announcing who President-elect Trump would like to have lead the agencies is not something that requires engagement with federal agencies, other than after the fact, he's going to need to make sure that they have the background checks that you mentioned from the FBI. They're going to need to go through the Office of Government Ethics to make sure their financial conflicts are cleared. The Senate has a responsibility to check with their advise and consent responsibility all the appointments that require their review. The fact that he's moving very quickly in terms of naming people that he would like to serve in his cabinet or in senior leadership positions does not mean that he's working very effectively. So we've already had one proposed nominee drop out. We have questions about the vetting that might have been done or not been done for others. So going fast and not doing it well doesn't actually move you forward in a very smart way. So understanding the situation within each agency, what the big issues are, what the challenges are, what the problems are that they're going to have to resolve, that's all fundamental work that's part of the preparation. You need to get access to the agencies to be able to do that.
People who are going to be entering the Trump administration, people like Vivek Ramaswamy, have said that agencies need to be, quote, deleted outright. Other Trump allies have described the incoming administration as, quote, a hostile takeover. Does this have any impact on the transition itself? What do you see as the larger impact of this kind of hostile takeover, as they describe it?
So again, I think there should be no hostility. The federal government is there in order to serve the duly elected new leaders. We have a democracy. The civil servants who are there, the career professionals who are apolitical, are used to new political teams coming in, changing the directions that they want to go. If you win an election, you have that right. What you don't have the right to do is break the law or break the Constitution. So even the very concept of a hostile takeover is going to lead to less effective government and get in the way of their ability to achieve the agenda that they've set out.
Max, you said that on day one, Trump's transition team may not be ready to take over government. Does that have an impact on people's everyday lives at all?
So it will have an impact on people's everyday life. It will even more importantly have an impact on the threat that we all may face from a national security problem. So the handoff of power is the point of maximum vulnerability for us as a nation. We've seen historically, whether it was 9/11 or in 2008, a threat during the inauguration, there are real issues that come up during the transition that involve our actual safety. So you do want to make sure that the new team coming in is ready to take that handoff and has all the information they need all the time to prepare to be actually ready. On the day-to-day life, that stuff will show up later on down the road. It may not be obvious, but there'll be impacts on everything from food safety to air traffic safety. The list is very long of things that we rely on for our federal government. And if you don't have a team that knows how to run the government effectively, you will see a degradation of service over time, and you might see, again, big risks of things not working at all.
Max Stier, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
The Department of Justice has asked a federal judge to force Google to sell off its popular web browser, Chrome. It comes after an antitrust case found Google had illegally maintained a monopoly in search. The outcome could have a major impact on the company and on the way so many of us interact with the internet. William Brangham has the details.
Amna, Chrome is worth an estimated $20 billion, and it is a central part of Google's business model. So the implications here could be enormous. In a filing late yesterday, the government also asked a judge to force Google to divest from its Android mobile operating system. It also wants the company to stop paying phone makers like Apple to keep Google search the default on their devices. Google, for its part, called the DOJ's approach unprecedented government overreach and said it would, quote, break a range of Google products that people love and find helpful in their everyday lives. So to help us understand this move, we are joined again by NPR technology correspondent Bobby Allen. Bobby Allen, so good to have you back on the program. What is the Department of Justice's argument here? Why are they saying, Google, you've got to carve Chrome away from your company?
The Department of Justice is saying that Google just has too much power. Justice lawyers say a way to sort of push back on that power is to have another company come in and buy Chrome, which is a web browser that has 2/3 of the market globally for browsing the internet. And for too long, the Department of Justice says Google has self-preferenced all of its products to give itself an unfair advantage. For instance, if you open a new tab on Chrome and type something in, you get Google search results. If you pull out your iPhone and you type something in to Safari, you get Google results. That has created a situation in which other competitors cannot rival this company because they just have it too locked down. And here, the Justice Department is trying to push back against that.
So let's say, specifically on this issue of Chrome, that Google was forced to separate itself from that search engine. Wouldn't everyone still just go to Google via every other browser that's out there because it is so popular?
That certainly is Google's argument. They say the reason why they have search dominance, and in fact they do, about 2/3 of the global browser market is dominated by Google's Chrome. But the company says that's because they have a superior product. And we actually have seen in Europe, which has done quite a bit to rein in big tech companies like Google, when consumers are given a choice, say when they have a new iPhone, asked, what would you like to be your default search engine? Overwhelmingly, consumers pick Google. And the company says that's because, their product is better than all the rivals. But the DOJ says, no, that's because they have been able to maintain this iron grip on Google search by operating like an illegal monopoly and by throwing its weight around whenever it can to box out rivals. And so now the question becomes, will Google actually have to sell Chrome? And if it does sell Chrome, who will buy it and what will that mean for consumers? And these are all questions we don't have the answers to, but one thing is for sure, it will certainly, this whole legal process is going to upend Silicon Valley in a pretty meaningful way.
And what about this issue I mentioned about Google and its relationship to Android? And what does the government want to do vis-a-vis that relationship?
Yeah, so the DOJ gave Google an ultimatum when it comes to Android, which is the most popular, operating system in the world. The DOJ has said either you stop self-preferencing your own products like Google Search, or we, the DOJ, may come back to this court and order that you spin off the Android division completely from Google. And that would be a really dramatic, severe punishment for Google. But the DOJ is not yet asking for that. They're saying, look, Google, we want to give you an opportunity to let more competitors into the Android operating system on everyone's Samsung phones so that people have more options beyond Chrome and beyond Google Search. If they fail to do that, the justice lawyers are saying they might just one day ask that Android 2 be sold off, just as they're pushing for Chrome to be sold off.
And I know at this point it's hard to know because we don't know how this is going to shake out. But for the average internet user who simply wants their phone or their computer to work in a smooth and seamless way and to get results that are legitimate and accurate, does this potentially upend those things, or will this not really affect consumers?
When it comes to consumers, most experts I talked to said if Chrome is sold off, it's actually going to be a bit of a pain. I mean, we all use Google and turn to Google, one, because it's kind of our habit, and two, because for the most part, it has been a pretty consistently good product over the years. Now, more than ever, especially since AI search engines have really been becoming increasingly popular, some have noticed that Google search has not been as strong as it has in the past. But in the short run, if Chrome is sold off to another company, it's going to become a bit of a pain in terms of, as you're saying, navigating the internet. You're going to see your search results, display a little differently. The interface might seem a little different and a little clunky because it's not the Google search that you're used to. But the Department of Justice says this in response: we need more competition into the online search market because Google for decades has dominated in a way that has just been unfair.
A political question for you. I know that the Department of Justice is not supposed to swing with the political winds, but attorneys general can say, focus on this and focus less on that. Do you have any sense as to whether the Trump Department of Justice, and now we don't know who's even going to be running that, would pursue these cases similarly the way the Biden's Department of Justice does?
That's the million-dollar question. It's worth noting that this lawsuit started in the Trump administration, and the Biden administration carried it to trial and won in court. Now, when Trump gets into office and whether his Department of Justice will pursue these similar remedies or reach a settlement that has some other details, we just don't know. I mean, one thing is for sure, and that's the Biden administration has, as part of its legacy, this push to rein in big tech and to come down really hard on companies like Google.
All right, Bobby Allen, the technology correspondent for NPR, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
For months, the U.S. military has been flying the Osprey, despite questions about whether it should be. The tilt-rotor aircraft was grounded after a crash in Japan last November that killed all 8 airmen on board. That crash was the 4th by an Osprey in the last 2 years. The military allowed the fleet to fly and said it mitigated the problem that caused these accidents. But the families of those killed in the crashes aren't convinced the Osprey is safe and want it grounded again. Nick Schifrin and producer Dan Segalin report from North Carolina.
At Marine Corps Air Station New River, the Marines of the Fighting Griffins approached the aircraft they called their workhorse. The MV-22 Osprey had been grounded for 3 months before we visited this summer. So Captain Dave Schroeder is eager to fly and make sure it's flight ready. He's an instructor who trains junior pilots.
Do you get rusty? Do other pilots get rusty?
Absolutely. Flying is a skill.
He's been flying military aircraft for more than a decade. He calls the Osprey one of a kind and gives it his full faith.
I'm fully confident in the way that this aircraft performs, and I trust my life in it. The flexibility it provides and the speed of range that we can operate is really unmatched.
The Osprey takes off like a helicopter and flies like a plane at twice the speed of other helicopters. The Marines call it essential to their mission and on average deployed 20 to ships every day last year. But it also has a history of high-profile crashes.
An experimental Marine Corps aircraft crashed today.
In Afghanistan, a U.S. Air Force Osprey went down.
A U.S. military Osprey aircraft crashed into the sea off Japan today, killing at least
Since 1992, 11 fatal Osprey crashes have killed 66. 4 have crashed just in the last 2 years in California, Australia, Japan, and Norway, killing 20 people.
It was such a heartbreaking and traumatic experience for so many of us. We're friends and colleagues with a lot of the families and crews, so initially we're just dealing with the loss.
Did you know some of the guys in Japan or California?
Yeah. One of my first initial thoughts was that could have been any one of us. I've got 3 young children at home, hoping to have another one soon. I've got a gorgeous wife, and they are one of my top priorities. So considering that could have been me, it was very emotional.
The 2022 crash in California killed 5 people, including 19-year-old Lance Corporal Evan Strickland, Brett and Michelle's son.
I don't think many people got to see the serious side, the caring side. He was an animal lover, musician. He loved jazz.
We found out, after his passing that he was probably going to elope. Crazy kid. That sweet little face.
One of the things that always hits me is when I'm looking at pictures, because there are no more new pictures.
When he was 14, Strickland attended an air show and sat in an Osprey cockpit. 5 years later, he was killed in one. He was the crew chief his very first day on the job when his Osprey crashed during a training mission. A military investigation found the crash was unpreventable, caused by a catastrophic and unanticipated mechanical failure. The Osprey is one of the world's most complex aircraft that has 2 engines mounted at the end of each wing. Each engine is attached to a gearbox and clutch that power the rotors. If one engine fails, the other engine can provide power to the other rotor through a drive shaft. And in California, the Osprey crashed because of what the military calls hard clutch engagements. The clutches slipped on both sides, then re-engaged, causing a power surge, damaging the drive shaft, and creating a catastrophic loss of thrust. The military acknowledges Ospreys have suffered a hard clutch engagement at least 19 times over the life of the program, but they don't know the root cause. The Stricklands and other families sued the Osprey's manufacturers for failing to address what they say are previously known mechanical failures.
My job going forward for my son, for those that have fallen, with him, is just to seek answers and accountability for something that should have been taken care of over a decade ago.
This repeated drumbeat of fatalities is totally unacceptable.
In June, the House Oversight Committee questioned the Osprey's safety. Naval Air Systems Commander Vice Admiral Carl Chebby blamed hard clutch engagement on aging aircraft.
Over time, the clutch wears out and has a higher susceptibility to slipping. It grounded the fleet and mandated that all aircraft will remove clutches that have over 800 hours. Yeah. That has been completed, and we have flown numerous hours since then without a hard clutch event. I want to make this point clear, though. That has not eliminated the risk. We will not eliminate that risk until we have a redesigned clutch. That is in testing right now.
The new clutch won't be ready until at least mid-2025. Not fast enough for Massachusetts Democrat Stephen Lynch.
If another Osprey goes down, we're done. This program's done. Ground them now. We'll bite the bullet for the next year or so until we get this clutch figured out. But we've already had too much carnage. We've already lost too many good men and women.
You're almost asking those still flying
to like roll the dice. And it feels like almost like to play Russian roulette.
Are they doing what's necessary to fix the problem and to find the actual cause? Not just, how can we...
A patch.
Yeah, exactly.
The Marines told NewsHour the Osprey has flown more than 600,000 flight hours, and that its 10-year average mishap rate is lower than some of the other aircraft they fly, such as the Harrier, Hornets, and Super Stallion.
Do you believe the Osprey is safe?
I do believe the Osprey is safe. I fly it right along with every other pilot that I have in this squadron, and I don't have a single doubt.
Back at New River, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Pullinger is the Fighting Griffins' commanding officer.
If you hear, see, smell anything that requires the aircraft to abort while we're in a hover, call abort, abort, abort over the ICS.
Schroeder, who since we filmed this left the military, trains on mitigating emergencies, even if he doesn't always know the cause.
If you don't know the root cause, if you don't officially know the root cause, then how do you know it's safe?
When I look at the numbers that were provided to us, I feel very confident that there's such a low chance of it happening again that I want to get back in the aircraft.
They keep discussing that the root cause is not known. To me, logically, the root cause is the clutch is too small.
Rex Rivolo is a retired Air Force pilot who flew combat missions over Vietnam and was, for 16 years, the Defense Department's chief Osprey analyst. He says the military's mitigation doesn't address fundamental flaws.
The drivetrain clearly is inadequate to handle the loads. The history of the clutch engagements and now this complete failure of the gearbox clearly indicates that there is a design problem.
Failure inside the gearbox that's behind the rotors, in part, caused last year's crash in Japan. The military investigation found that the aircraft's left-hand gearbox started chipping, causing the gear's teeth to grind down, leading to, quote, rapid cascading failures of the drive system. The report also said the crew could have landed earlier when the chips were initially detected. But gearbox failure is another risk the military has known about for years. An unreleased Safety Investigation Board review obtained by military.com found a gearbox failed in 2013 due to a manufacturing defect in the way the gears were made, and documents obtained by the Associated Press showed 7 previous cases of cracking. The Japan crash report unusually blamed senior Pentagon leadership. Quote, safety assessments and their findings were given insufficient treatment at the program level and have been inadequately communicated to the military services.
There is a strong desire to keep these aircraft flying. And basically, you compromise good judgment in order to do that. And that is a leadership problem.
Rivolo urges the military to install an additional warning system similar to the kind that exists on this type of British military helicopter that would alert the pilot to unusual vibrations.
The V-22 does not do it, even though they have the onboard systems to make the detections. In today's environment, that's unconscionable.
Until those changes to design that you're advocating can be made, or there can be a better warning system, should the aircraft be grounded?
Yes, aircraft should be grounded.
We all think that they should be grounded, that no mother should go through this.
Gabriella Lavoie is the mother of 33-year-old Technical Sergeant Zachary Lavoie, who died in the crash in Japan. He'd been in the Air Force for 10 years. He'd planned to get out, get married, and start a family.
It's been hard. It's been really hard. You don't expect to outlive your children, especially somebody that, we're not in times of war. It was just a training mission.
How hard is it to talk about it now?
I had talked to him maybe 2 days before, and we were making plans for him to come and visit for Christmas. It was a very happy time. We had a good talk, and then suddenly, he's gone.
It is a plane that airmen and the Marines love, and the military calls vital.
Yep.
But all these families want is to make sure it's safe. For the PBS News Hour, I'm Nick Schifrin in Jacksonville, North Carolina.
And an update now to our lead story about former Congressman Matt Gaetz withdrawing from consideration for U.S. Attorney General. Late this evening, President-elect Trump nominated Pam Bondi to the role. Bondi is the former Attorney General of Florida and was one of Trump's lawyers during his impeachment trials. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Nawaz. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you for joining us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the legendary Mississippi River, travelers explore Civil War battlefields and historic riverside towns. Aboard our fleet of American riverboats, you can experience local culture and cuisine and discover the music and history of the mighty Mississippi. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Leonard and Norma Chlorfine and the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation.
A law partner rediscovers her grandmother's artistry and creates a trust to keep the craft alive. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your passions, and the way you enrich your community. Life well planned.
The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.